Hey, this is Alan with a brand new episode of Devil May Play.
Hey guys, Trip here, and today we're going to be talking about all the good stuff in the industry. You heard that right. We're actually going to talk about something positive for a change.
No.
It's that time of year, and honestly, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, believe it or not. But first off, Lark here, or Brash Bandicoot, or Alan, or all the different aliases he goes by, has an interesting story to tell. I do not know what the story is, but that's how we're going to start the episode. So, after you.
All right, I needed a picture, like a fireplace and like some drinks around so we can make this like a full experience. So this is kind of a funny story that I wanted to share, and which ties into our notes on positivity for this episode. So, as most of you know, I have a 7-month-old, so I've been trying to cut back on some gaming expenses. You know, spending money where I don't need to. I try not to do that anymore. I'm still bad at it, but I'm getting better. So in that vein, I've been really excited for Super Mario Odyssey, obviously, because I'm a huge Super Mario fan. It looked a lot like Super Mario 64. I've seen a lot of comparisons between Odyssey and Super Mario 64. So needless to say, I was like almost in literal agony when the game came out to like a massive acclaim, getting 10 out of 10s from so many publications. And I'm just, sitting at home like, oh, don't buy a Switch, don't buy a Switch. Whatever you do, don't buy a Switch, right? So it was 2 Fridays ago of the time we're recording this. Game had come out, I think, a week ago or something like that. Whatever. It was like within the first week. And I was like, all right, I can't buy a Switch, but you know what? I'll just buy something new. I just need to get my mind off the Switch. So I was like, I'll get Wolfenstein. That looks fun. I get to kill Nazis. Great. I was getting paid like next Monday. So I was like, all right, I'm going to use my Best Buy credit card. I've got a lot of credit there. I'll buy a digital code. Here's my first mistake. Never buy digital codes from Best Buy. Because for one thing, when you're trying to play on a Friday night after your wife and baby have gone to sleep and every minute is precious, waiting 40 minutes to get the digital code is not a good idea. I don't understand why it takes them 40 minutes to give me a digital code, but whatever. The second problem arose when I typed in the digital code that Best Buy gave me, and instead of Wolfenstein Deluxe Edition, Assassin's Creed Origins Deluxe Edition pops up. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, maybe I entered the code wrong. So I go back to the email I got, enter the code again, and yes, it is Assassin's Creed Origins Deluxe. So I had to make a decision.
I was just going to say, that sounds pretty good. I mean, you guys know I'm a big Egypt fan, so I've been waiting for a chance to get that game.
I mean, I am excited for the game. I remember the review saying that it's like the best one since 4, and it's made a lot of changes to the formula, and it's, Ubisoft has responded to some of the criticism, so I was like, you know what? Screw it, I'm going to get Wolfenstein anyway, or I'm going to get Assassin's Creed anyways. I don't feel like trying to get the refund code or whatever. I don't feel like trying to deal with that. I'll just buy it on the PSN store so that I know for sure I'm going to get Wolfenstein. So I did end up buying Wolfenstein as well as Assassin's Creed Origins. Gets even better. 3 days later, I got an email from Best Buy with the code for the Wolfenstein Deluxe Edition. So as of right now, I have a code that I don't need. If anybody listening to this wants a code for the price of a normal Wolfenstein, which is $60 instead of $80, let me know. Because I'm trying to get rid of it. I definitely don't need it. So I just made a lot of mistakes in this situation. But what's even better and puts the cherry on top is that a week later, I ended up getting a new job. And the day after I got a new job, I went out and bought a Switch anyways. So all of this effort to curb my impulse to buy a Switch completely failed the second I was like, oh, I'm getting a new job, slight pay raise. Yep, I'm getting a Switch. And it's worth it. Super Mario Odyssey is great. But that's just my life in a nutshell. I'm trying to be better about impulses, but I'm really bad at it.
Meanwhile, I just don't have any money. So I don't even have to think about that sort of thing. I'm lower on Maslow's hierarchy, I think.
But you have time. See, that's the thing I don't have. You never have both. You never have money and time. I have Shadow of War, I have Assassin's Creed Origins, and I have Wolfenstein all sitting unplayed right now because I just got a Switch and I'm like pumped for Xenoblade 2 and I'm playing Splatoon 2 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Super Mario Odyssey. So but anyways,
this was First World Problems, the intro.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm completely aware of it. I'm just making fun of myself because, like I said, I have no impulse control. But Super Mario Odyssey, it's a fantastic game. In many ways, I think it's a return to form. I feel like it's a true successor to Super Mario 64. It just feels like a true spiritual successor, if that makes sense. But what about you? I mean, before I go into why I'm really happy for the Super Mario Odyssey and the Switch, why don't you? What do you have to say about positive notes in the gaming industry?
Well, if you've been watching this channel for a while, and if you watch the podcast a lot, you might think, and you might be justified in thinking, that the industry is about to fall apart, that everything is terrible, that games are just getting worse and worse and worse. And in this episode, I really want to pull us out of that kind of AAA mindset, that mindset where we focus so much on the AAA industry and all of the bullshit they're doing, and we kind of lose sight of the bigger picture, the bigger picture of this massive gargantuan beast we call the video game industry. Whether it's indie games or so-called AA games like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, or even some aspects of the AAA industry where they are actually doing the right thing. There's a lot of good going on in the industry. So in this episode, I really want us to not forget all of the bullshit, because there is a lot of bullshit, and this
Sure.
podcast is going to keep talking about all the bullshit. But I want us to realize that there's aspects of this industry worth fighting for.
Yeah.
There's good stuff happening. There's innovations. The past 2 or 3 years in the industry, I think, have been a net good. Yes, 2017 will become known as the year of the loot box, but I hope it'll also be known as the year of Super Mario Odyssey, the year of people realizing how much you can still do with games, people realizing that niche games can still be interesting, can still be successful, people realizing that you don't need to fall into the same formulas, people ultimately realizing that the bullshit in the industry doesn't have to be bullshit, that we don't need to do all of these crappy things like loot boxes and microtransactions to make a good game. Whether you're on the indie side or the AAA side, these things don't have to happen. And that's what I want to focus on today.
Yeah, and I think going forward, what you're saying basically is we're going to try and strike a better balance of the negative and positive. It's like criticizing is only going to get you so far. We also need to be paying attention to the people that are doing things what we think are consumer friendly. So I think that is a good goal for the channel, if you agree.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Today I want to, especially because it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's a perfect time.
We did one of these episodes last year, which is really weird to think about that we've been doing this for over a year. It's time, there's no better time than now to acknowledge all the good that's happening. So
Sure.
Lark, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of funny that we're talking, that this is going to be my big topic for our positivity episode, given that we were criticizing Nintendo on some of their business practices, some of their marketing. The bottom line is the Switch still has a lot of flaws to it, but the games that have come out, like, think about it, within less than a year, you have Zelda Breath of the Wild, you have Splatoon 2, you have Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle, I don't know what the title is for that, I can never remember it, and you have Super Mario Odyssey. All of those are pretty great games. 2 massive heavy hitters with Zelda and Super Mario Odyssey. And I think it took a year for Nintendo to get a really great, like, heavy hitter on the Wii U. I think it was Super Mario 3D World that came out like a year after the Wii U came out. So for a whole year, there wasn't like a system seller game. And playing Super Mario Odyssey, I actually just beat the main story. I have somewhere in like 333 moons. There's so many things I could say about this game, but it just feels fresh. And I know that a lot of people have drawn comparisons between this and Super Mario 64, and there definitely are comparisons, but the capture mechanic just revolutionizes the way you can interact with the worlds. And every world has its own kind of unique, for the most part, its own unique capture mechanic that completely informs the level design, the enemies, the types of challenges you have. And it's just it's endlessly fun. Endlessly fun.
It's the ideal in a lot of ways in regards to game designs, taking a simple mechanic that's easy to understand, easy to wrap your brain around, but having it lead to unlimited depth. And, we always talk about dynamic gameplay on this channel because that's like my favorite thing in the world. And I haven't played Odyssey. I want to, but I haven't. But that's what I keep hearing. That's what it keeps coming back to.
Yeah. And I was worried that with the open, like, I won't call it open worlds, but the bigger areas, that you might kind of get lost, comparing Odyssey with another platformer that came out this year, Yooka-Laylee. I felt like Yooka-Laylee's level design was a bit lacking because it it just felt like stuff was scattered around at random. Whereas the Mario stages feel way more designed, way more purposeful. And that's not even talking about just the art design and the music and all the other things that go into the game that just make it such a fun experience. And, I'm probably going to keep playing it, so I can't say for certain, but, the difference between, say, Mario Odyssey and Zelda Breath of the Wild, which was another fantastic game. And I don't want to sound negative here, but I'm saying the first 50 hours of Zelda Breath of the Wild to me were just nonstop fun. The last 50, it started to falter a little bit for one reason or another. And so far, I haven't hit that with Super Mario Odyssey. And what's crazy is, like, the main game you can beat with, like, I don't remember exactly how many moons. It's around 120 or 150, somewhere around there. Somebody's going to correct me. But it's under 200 moons to beat the main game. Let's say that. But there's a total of, like, 830. So really, beating the main game, the story portion, is, like, not even a quarter of the game. There's so much more that you have left to do after you beat the main game. And that's something that I wish a lot more games would give, is a reason to go back and play. Like Super Mario Odyssey, you finish the main story, and I'm kind of giving spoilers here. You can go back to the previous worlds that you visited, and there's all new challenges, all new moons, all new things to do. And you're even better than you were the first time you visited. So it's like a whole new reason to use your skill set, your tool set, to play and explore the world, which is just, in my mind, it's fantastic. I don't want to say it's a perfect game because I don't know, like, everybody has a different idea of a perfect game, and we've talked about this. But to me, it's endlessly fun. I have not had not a single moment in that game where I've been bored or felt like I'm going through the motions or anything like that. And I want to just take one specific level to talk about why I think Odyssey succeeds. And that level is New Donk City for anyone that's played it. And whereas with games like Assassin's Creed and Shadow of War, where the scaling of buildings and things has kind of become like secondary, right? Like you just hold down a button, you boost. With Super Mario Odyssey, New Donk City, the level itself just invites the player to explore and then to use various capture mechanics to get around the city. And just getting around is fun, like long jumping from building to building, using power lines to get across. It's just fun to traverse the world, which for a platformer, in my opinion, is like absolutely critical. It needs to be fun to get around, because that is the majority of the game. Yeah, that is what a platformer is. So if it's not fun to get around, that was kind of my problem with Yooka-Laylee. It's not going to be as enjoyable. So I think that, to kind of conclude my point, I think that I'm very hopeful for the future of Nintendo, in the sense that they do seem to be taking some chances with IPs, like that Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle game. When that first screenshot was leaked to the first banner or whatever, the art was leaked, people were totally against the game. And then it came out and everybody was like, wow, this is Mario XCOM. Like, this is crazy. It's a new IP, even though it's Mario, it is a new IP. It's a new direction for Mario. And I hope that Nintendo capitalizes on the user base they have with the Switch, and really starts to pursue either new IPs or like reinventing IPs like they have with Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. I don't know if we can say that's going to happen, but I'm saying it's looking hopeful from where I stand, as far as just for the games. I don't want to get into the online, services or some of the other, flaws of the Switch. Just looking at the gameplay perspective, the roster of games that have come out right now, it's unbelievable that we have this many good games within less than a year.
Right. And for me, the lesson that I really think we should take from Odyssey is that in every single way, Odyssey is the exact game that other elements, let's call them, in the AAA industry think can't be successful. Or at least they want us to think they can't be successful. It's a colorful, bright, happy game. No. You want something gritty, dark, gray, and realistic looking. It's a 3D platformer. No. You want a first-person shooter where you just shoot up a bunch of soldiers all day.
There's skins. There are literally skins. You're collecting costumes is a large part of the game, and there's no money involved in that. There's coins, but you collect coins in game.
Right,
and
there's no microtransactions.
Right.
No. You can't have a big budget game without microtransactions. It's all single player. No. You don't want that. You want to focus on multiplayer. You want some sort of Mario co-op or versus mode. But it's everything that, according to other elements in the AAA industry, cannot and should not exist in today's market. And I feel like this is an object lesson on what a game can be, what a game can still be, what can still be successful, what people want that they may not have even known that they wanted in the first place. Games can still be diverse. Games can still be complete packages. Games can still be bright and colorful and happy, and they can make millions of dollars. Now, granted, not everybody has the clout of Super Mario as an IP,
Sure.
but that's only one component of what made Odyssey so great. If people just didn't want single player platformers anymore, yeah, Mario Odyssey probably would have still done well because, again, it's Mario, but not nearly to this extent.
Well, and it's sold, I think, more than any other Mario game in history. I think I read that. Like, in initial sales, like it's reached the highest sales quicker than any other Mario game.
Yeah, and you cannot sum that all up to
Nintendo, like Mario,
IP, especially when it's on a new platform, the Switch, that doesn't have a lot of games that fall into the typical AAA space. If this came out on the Xbox, then maybe you could explain some of that because people already had the system and they're like, oh, maybe I'll check this out.
The user base is nowhere near as big as Xbox One or
there's
PS4.
So many elements that work against this idea that gamers just don't want this anymore, that games like this can't exist.
I was going to say we could use a smaller example for platforming and for gameplay mechanics that are interesting, which kind of, again, features hats. A Hat in Time just came out. I haven't played it. I know it's on PC, and I know they reached like 50,000 sales, which they're a smaller studio. They're definitely not AAA, but that still proves that we're living in a time where what we're talking about is that, sure, there's a lot of bad practices going on in AAA gaming, but there's still so many other creative new ideas coming out within the indie space and within the smaller developer space, and A Hat in Time does basically the same things we were talking about, platformer, single player. As far as I know, I don't think there's any microtransactions, shorter game. And I really want to pick it up once it comes out on console, but I get what you're saying. And then this is the strength of Nintendo, though. It's also like their fault too. It's a double-edged sword where for the past, really, in my opinion, since the GameCube, they have been marching to a different beat, basically a beat of their own drummer, right? Where they're no longer trying to compete in terms of raw processing power. They're trying to compete in terms of gameplay opportunities. And while I felt like the Wii had some potential, it was never fully realized. The Wii U they never really came up with a message for why the tablet was necessary. The Switch, I'm telling you, being able to play it portable, like playing games portably, even though it's only 720p and it's not the brightest or best looking like technology behind it, it's still fantastic to be able to just pick it up and continue playing whatever game you're playing, like Super Mario Odyssey or Mario Kart 8. Like I was literally, my son was playing around in his bedroom and just playing with toys and stuff like that. And I brought my Switch up and I was playing for like maybe 10 minutes. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm playing like a AAA console game while, like, you know what I mean? The portability, it just can't be overstated how cool that is. And yes, there's problems like, power and battery and stuff like that, but it's still a good concept. And I think that's what's going to help the Switch basically surpass the Wii U very quickly. And when the user base is strong, then we'll see hopefully more third-party developers start to say, you know what, maybe we should start working on, Nintendo games again. That's what I hope.
Well, yeah, this comes back to, the theme of this episode, positive notes. This is another example of the industry taking a simple idea and innovating with it. This idea that you bring up of something so simple as just being able to take your game and bring it somewhere else. Like, I've often thought about that. Like, if and when I finally get a Switch, it's going to be so weird and so cool to be able to play a 3D Zelda game in my hands.
Yep.
When I'm lying in bed before I go to sleep. Like, that's so weird and so cool and so fascinating to be able to do that. And again, simple innovation. That's a lot of what this industry has been doing, even if it goes unnoticed.
I don't think it's gone unnoticed, though. I mean,
underappreciated
maybe. This year, I'm going to miss so many games, but like just running through the list of good games, you have Neo, you have Horizon Zero Dawn, which I still haven't like finished. I've been meaning to get to. You had Breath of the Wild, you had Nier Automata, you had I'm going to forget so many games, but there's just been a slew of like great, smaller but still big enough games that came out. Like Nier Automata, I think sold like 1 million copies, and the developer was like almost in tears because it was such a big deal to them. But what I'm saying is that there's all these great games that are coming out. It's almost like too many to keep track of. Like, yes, we're still dealing with the AAA nonsense we've been talking about, but there have just been a slew of really solid games coming out. And I mean, I don't have time to play them all, but the point being, there's a lot of innovation coming down the pipeline, because I think people are starting to get tired of the practices that we've been mentioning with the AAA, like the annualization of franchises, the fact that you're basically almost getting the same game every single year. You know, even Assassin's Creed Origins taking a year break, that's big. The fact that they took a year off and then completely revamped the series. And I've heard comparisons between Origins and Witcher 3, which I'm like, you know, obviously I'm interested in that. I haven't been able to play it, but I've heard that, you know, some people dislike the changes they made, but at least they made significant changes so that it doesn't just feel like Assassin's Creed, you know, 10 or 11 or whatever it is at this point. So
exactly.
Even within the AAA space, we're seeing some developers and some publishers responding to criticism. EA, but I won't even get into that. That's no negativity. No negativity.
That'll be for a future episode. But
Sure.
I feel like maybe it's not underappreciated, but I feel like a lot of it gets lost in the fray when it comes to people like us, or a lot of the people watching this video,
and that's why we want to do
the so-called quote-unquote hardcore gamers, if you want to call us that. I mean, I suck at games, but
I'm not a hardcore gamer anymore.
Right, but that's what people who would call us, the people who care about this sort of thing. And
we definitely
I feel
care.
like it definitely gets lost in the fray with us, because I mean, humans just naturally, I mean, it's how we survive. We focus on negative things. Like, that's how we don't get killed in the wild. We need to some extent focus on the bad stuff so that we can solve it. But it's so easy to get sucked into that and develop this headspace, this mindset that the industry as a whole is going downhill, that all of this bad stuff, and it is bad stuff, is consuming the entire industry. And it really isn't, especially if you can get yourself out of this idea that the AAA industry is the be-all, end-all. If, yeah, there's indie games and some smaller stuff, but the AAA industry is where shit's happening. If you can really just divorce yourself from that idea, I think, at least in my case, I started to see the gaming industry in a much more positive light.
Well, what I think is, when you have so many, and this is kind of like a silver lining, when you have so many bad practices going on in the gaming industry, when a game comes along that does something new or innovative or doesn't treat consumers like cash cows, people tend to pay attention to it, and they're like, oh, this is nice. You know, Titanfall 2, when it released and they said they were going to put out like DLC content, like maps and I think weapons, skins they were going to do microtransactions for, but the majority of content that normally is locked behind a paywall. Unfortunately, the game didn't sell well because of the release window, but that was still an effort on their part to address the growing concerns of player imbalance. You know what I mean? Like some players getting better weapons, or players not being able to play together because they don't have the right map packs. I mean, there's so many examples to pull from. It's difficult to pick one, but I'm going to go to Hellblade because we've talked about Hellblade before. We've talked about how this game is kind of the counterpoint to the idea that you have to spend a lot of money to make a good game, or to make a game that's cinematic, because it's very cinematic. And I've played probably 3 or 4 hours of it, and I can attest to just the quality of the game. And when you look at, I need to watch the developer diaries really, but when you look at the ways that they innovated to try and reduce costs for the game, that's to me the real, aside from the great moral of trying to understand mental health and portraying it in a realistic way, and consulting with people that have dealt with mental health issues to make sure that their game's accurate and it isn't just kind of a, oh yeah, she's crazy and she goes and kills some bad people. Like there was a real attempt to understand mental illnesses and how they affect people, and that informed the storytelling. And obviously it made for a very, very, very interesting game, because it's a medium. You know, this goes back to our points of that we've always talked about, that video games are such an interesting and rich medium for storytelling, right? Playing through Hellblade and seeing, you know, the hallucinations or the visual hallucinations and hearing the audio, like it's a much more immersive experience than even watching a movie or reading a book or any other medium. It's really a one of a kind experience. And the fact that they harnessed this medium and really made something interesting with it, again, goes to the notes of positivity. And the fact that they were able to do this without, the typical AAA nonsense of microtransactions and whatnot, and putting it out digitally only at first for $30, and that it was a success and it sold well. To me, that's kind of a great example of, you don't have to do it the way that everyone else does it to make a good game and for it to sell well. Now, granted, I'm sure there are a lot of examples. What we're talking about is, I guess, survivor bias. I forget the right term. The idea that basically we're only going to know the stories of success and we're not going to know, the stories of failure, like something like Lawbreakers, where they did not sell very well at all. But I'm just saying it still is an example of you don't have to play by their rules to make a good game.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Were you speechless there?
For once in my life.
I was going to say, that's a first. I mean, yeah. I could pull from so many other examples, and other people have talked about this, and some people have said, well, this isn't replicable for every single industry. No doubt. I'm not saying it is. We still have AAA titles like Assassin's Creed Origins that I'm looking forward to, or Wolfenstein: The New Colossus with the storytelling there. I played that for like an hour or two, and it's some really, really interesting cutscenes, and like it's very gripping, it's very gritty, and it's kind of, again, we were talking about how Odyssey does something different, and Wolfenstein kind of falls more in line with what you expect from AAA industry, but there's still a lot of interesting storytelling there. So let's end this on a note of positivity, like looking forward. What are we excited for where the industry could go? For me, I've said that I'm really excited for the Switch because I feel like Nintendo is finally attractive to third-party developers again. And that,
yeah.
I've also read an article in Game Informer that a lot of indie devs are really pumped for the Switch because their types of games, their genre of games like platformers and puzzle games definitely fit better in a Nintendo console than perhaps like an Xbox or PS4 console. And even though some people are skeptical of the mid-generation upgrade, I do think it's interesting that for once we have a massive overhaul and an increase in performance in the middle of a console cycle without losing your library, basically. Like, games are compatible for both PS4 and PS4 Pro. I have a Pro. Xbox One X is coming out. That's going to be I think it's 4K compatible, like in terms of the Ultra HD discs. I'm actually thinking about getting one eventually once I get a 4K TV. But I'm saying that it's almost like, things are certainly changing. I think 4K is going to be one massive change. I don't know what VR is going to do, but I'm saying, for me, I'm excited to see what the Switch is going to provide, what games are coming out for the Switch. We've already seen new IPs with Mario X Rabbids Kingdom Battle, right? We've seen a reinvigoration of franchises with Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. And Splatoon 2 is just kind of continuing the tradition of a cool offbeat shooter. I'm excited for the Switch. What about you? Is there any company, any type of gaming, any type of, you've talked about dynamic gameplay. So perhaps is there any game coming down the pipeline that you're saying this game I think could change things?
I guess you could say I'm very excited for the future for a variety of reasons. Now, I think we can both agree, without being negative, that the industry is made up in a lot of ways of followers, people who copy what's popular.
I mean, that's true of any art form, though.
Well, yeah, definitely. But I feel like with games like Mario Odyssey, with Breath of the Wild, we already saw some comparisons between that and Assassin's Creed Origins. I'm happy to see these games being so successful. These games, again, proving wrong the ideas that the AAA industry seems to have on what video games can be. So I'm looking forward to more games that are in the vein of Breath of the Wild, more games that aren't afraid to be bright, colorful, happy, focused on simple mechanics taken to unlimited depth like Mario Odyssey. I'm excited to see what the industry learns from this, what they take from this, how they mold it and mix it up to make something new. There's so much new stuff or a return to old stuff that was good going on in the industry that I'm honestly slightly overwhelmed. I honestly can't wait. I want to see what the industry does with these lessons. I hope they learn these lessons, and I want to see where they take these lessons. And I keep coming back to this, and I might sound like a broken record, but this is kind of the main point I wanted to get across with this episode. You don't need to do the bad things to be successful. That if any developer on the smallest off chance they're just scrolling through YouTube and they see this, that would be my lesson. You don't need to be a dick. Look at all the games that aren't dicks. You don't need to be a dick to be successful.
It just sounds like you're saying that you're talking about like sex simulators. Like, look at all these games that don't feature dicks. I don't know if Andromeda does, but
I mean, I feel like if you're playing an erotic game, I mean, in most cases, then you can be a dick. I feel like that's a time for a dick. Don't put dicks where they don't belong. That's the lesson. Don't put
That's a
dicks
great
where they
lesson.
don't belong. We
Don't
don't
put-
need dicks in our 3D platformers. We don't need dicks in our AAA non-sexual games. Don't be a dick in those scenarios. There's so much good happening right now. There's so much creativity, so much innovation. And again, I want the industry to learn that lesson. I know it's easy to throw in loot boxes and microtransactions and just give us the same thing over and over and over again, but the rewards are greater, both financially and just for your reputation as a whole.
I'll give one game that I'm really looking forward to, and I think you are too. And this kind of ties exactly in with your point that if you treat your customers well, they're going to have loyalty, right? And even though we've talked about it's a little naive to be completely loyal to a company because they're still a company and they still want to make money at the end of the day, you can tell that there's some people that care about their craft and they're passionate about it, and then they treat their players well. That just gives you more and more reasons to pay attention to what they're doing, essentially. It's like paying it forward. Like, okay, we're going to treat you well in the hopes that when we put out our next game, you'll pay attention to it, possibly buy it. The company that comes to mind for this, CD Projekt Red. And
Definitely.
we know very little about Cyberpunk 2077, other than it was a tabletop RPG. But I would imagine, I think that game is going to be the new standard setter. It's going to raise the bar for what open world RPGs can do. And I'm putting that on probably the top of my list, even though we don't know when it's coming out. I just feel like that's going to be a game changer for sure, no pun intended. And it kind of incorporates everything you've talked about, everything we've talked about, all the good notes from the industry, that you don't have to nickel and dime people, that you can create these immersive worlds, that you can use dynamic gameplay to drive everything. And you and I have talked about how certain game companies perhaps are not living up to their potential and they're kind of coasting it out, Bethesda, and that all it takes is for one company to come along and give you an open world sandbox RPG, but do it better, to kind of say, this is how you do it. And going back to the leaders and followers thing, it's not always a bad thing that something comes along that's groundbreaking and other developers follow suit, because there's a reason that it was groundbreaking and there's a reason people like it. So hopefully when we see Cyberpunk come out and we see some of the opportunities that are created there with gameplay, other developers will like step up their game essentially, you know?
Exactly. And I guess in closing, every single time something like this happens, there's some new innovation, some new type of gameplay, a storm that comes to this industry. There's always a paradigm shift. And I guess the question I want to pose to you guys, I mean, we've talked about what we're hoping for, what changes we're hoping to see, what changes we're expecting. What do you think this paradigm shift is going to be with releases like Mario Odyssey, with single player first person shooters that are focusing on, more on the atmosphere and the story, like Wolfenstein?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the industry is going next in a positive way? What do you think the next paradigm shift is going to be?
I say virtual porn for sure.
I feel like people are going to die.
They are. Sonic Forces 4K porn version.
Oh, God. The thing is that you're not joking. That is definitely going to be a real thing.
It's definitely going to be a real thing. I'm sorry.
It probably already is.
It was too serious of a note to end on, so I had to get silly with it. But anyways,
fair enough.
You all can answer the question that Psychotrip posed. You can ignore my stupid comments.
Or don't. Tell us what VR virtual 3D porn you would like to see. Let us know in the comments. Make sure it is as graphic as possible.
Please do.
And on that note,
yep.
Yeah, we will. I guess we'll bear the brunt of those comments and see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.